Hi guys, welcome to our Tech Lockdown Daily Webcast, where we will be discussing technology that will help us all during the lockdown period and beyond. My name is Zul, and I'll be your moderator for today. In this episode of our webcast today, our guest for today is Kamal Brar, Rubrik's Vice President and General Manager for the APJ region, to discuss the evolving nature of today's working environment and whether companies have the right systems in place to manage their data. With that being said, I will now pass over to Said to start with today's discussion.
All right, thanks, Zul. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on yet another episode of the Tech Lockdown. And thank you, Kamal, for being on the show today.
So thank you for having me, and I appreciate you guys accommodating.
No problem. So for enterprises in the ASEAN region, the pandemic situation has definitely changed a lot of things. So I'd like to know from your perspective, how has the challenges as well as the demand for data-related technologies changed since the start of January until now?
Yeah, look, I think as you would know, the lockdown really has accelerated some of the companies and enterprises who are looking at more secure ways to actually provide remote access capability for their workers. So I think fundamentally what we've seen since the lockdown in January is more and more projects being accelerated. That's not to say that there wasn't an uptick of adoption of these capabilities and technologies in the last few years. I think one of the good things you have in the Asia Pacific market, and in particular in ASEAN, is there's a lot of new technologies being adopted, and I think customers in this region are willing to experiment, but also be leading edge in terms of the technology adoption. So what we've seen in some cases is more and more of the smaller medium enterprises still struggling to kind of uptake quickly, but definitely the larger enterprises, the banks, the financial services customers, we see a lot more uptake with them and more of an accelerated uptake in the last few months.
Right, that's right. I think many companies have had to accelerate their digital transformation, and there has also been a lot of talk about the need to transition more quickly to a digital workforce. What are your views on that, and how prepared are organizations for that transition?
Yeah, I mean, if I look at just at ourselves as Rubrik as a company, we're effectively working all globally at this point in time. So the transition for us as a company was pretty seamless. Most of us in technology companies are very used to working from a remote environment. I think where it's become a challenge, and definitely for the region, some of the processes in some large organization, enterprise companies, in particular the banks or more complex insurance side, they still require some processes which need to be updated or reflect the world that we're living in today and the current circumstances of non-physical interaction. I think they're the ones that have had significant amount of challenges and change, and how do they adapt to these processes without really compromising on their services? And that's a challenge. So I think across the board, definitely what we see in the ASEAN region, Singapore leading the way. I think Singapore has a great uptake of the telecommuting and remote worker, and there's been great transition on that front. I think the larger enterprises have had the existing technologies, the frameworks, just like us today, we're doing this webinar remotely. Really, everything is pretty much in place, but it's the smaller medium enterprise companies which have a lot more work to do. A lot of the smaller medium enterprise businesses which have to transform their entire model, right? Where traditionally they're largely dependent on in-person engagement or traffic. They now need to switch to a completely digital engagement, and that's a pretty significant amount of change for a very small for the small enterprises, and of course, in many cases, they don't have the skills or potentially the investments around it.